On today's show, we continue our Houston Rockets media series, joined by one of the voices of your Houston Rockets, Craig Ackerman. We'll dive into how he got his start in sports media, how he became the play-by-play TV commentator for your Houston Rockets, as well as expectations for this upcoming season, how certain roles will be changing on this team. Can Kevin Porter Jr. embrace a new role with this Rockets team coming off the bench? And then what are the expectations for the rookies on the team? Ime Thompson, Cam Whitmore, who's poised to take the biggest leap? It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
Throw it up to Jalen Green.
Sengun here in the short row. Oh my, that's the no look.
Jabari for three and the win. Yeah!
Look at Tari, Eason.
Here comes Tari.
No! T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
The Houston Rockets select Ime Thompson and Cam Whitmore.
One thing I have never done is not made the playoffs, and so we want to take that step here as well.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for making LOR part of your day every single day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. And joining us now is a very special guest, none other than the voice of your Houston Rockets, one of the many voices of your Houston Rockets, Craig Ackerman. So excited to have you here on the program with us, Craig, to talk about a Houston Rockets team that's going to look very different going into this next season than it did this past year.
It will. Thanks for having me on, as always, Jackson. I appreciate it. And I'm excited. Obviously, the Rockets underwent some pretty significant changes, as everybody was anticipating, with their cap space and free agency and another draft and so forth this past summer. And so now we're, before we know it, 6 weeks away or thereabouts from the start of training camp, and then preseason games shortly thereafter, then the regular season at the end of October. I'm ready. I'm excited. I'm ready to go. I'll be honest, I wish the season was starting like tomorrow, but because at this point of every offseason, it's like, okay, I'm ready to go again. But just 6 more weeks to go, and we'll be able to quench some of our thirst for this team.
It'll be over in the blink of an eye, man. NBA offseason, I feel like it hits, and then it's just this agonizing wait to get back to basketball, and then it happens, and you get the best 9-10 months out of the year when basketball is
especially
full swing.
These 2 months tend to drag. August and September tend to drag a little bit, but yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Now, I wanted to do things a little bit differently this go around, Craig. Before we dive into some of the expectations and optimism for this team moving into this next season, I'd actually like to know, and like our listeners to get to know you a little bit, running this kind of media series. So many different voices that cover this team and that are part of the day-to-day, the diehard fans who really get to know these Houston Rockets. So I'd like our fans to get a chance to know you a little bit better and start with just your background and how you found yourself in a basketball-related career field to begin with.
All right, I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version of this. Ultimately, I was hired as an intern in 1994, started working full-time when I graduated college in 1997 in the broadcast department. For the Rockets, originally as an intern, was cutting highlights, and then I produced the games for the Rockets, and then simultaneously got jobs working games at Rice University, and then after 3 years there, moved on to be the primary voice at the University of Houston for 3 years. The Comets came around, so I started doing games for the Houston Comets in the WNBA. We had an Arena Football League team, first the Texas Terror, and then the oh my God, now I'm drawing a blank. Was it the Houston Thunder Bears? Okay. I wanted to say Thunderbirds, but Houston Thunder Bears, as they changed names there a couple of years in. And then ultimately the Rockets made some changes on their broadcast teams in 2003, and so I kind of stopped doing games at U of H, moved into a full-time broadcast role with the Rockets, doing pre-half and post-game shows on the radio side. Then did that for a handful of years, filling in from time to time for Gene Peterson and Jim Foley. And then ultimately, when Gene and Jim retired. I was fortunate to get the opportunity to start doing radio full-time, play-by-play in 2008, and then did full-time radio up until about 7 or 8 years ago, and that's when Bill Worrell decided to cut back on his travel. And so I started splitting duties, did home radio, road TV. And then once Bill ultimately decided to retire a couple of years ago, I've been doing TV full time. So there you go. It's been 20, this will be season 29 or 30 or something like that. It's been a long time.
Oh man, we got to do something. We got to have something special for you for the 30th anniversary season, whenever that eventually rolls around. You're aging yourself here just a little bit, Craig.
A little bit. Although I started working for the team when I was 5. So there you go.
There we go. Right. He's a Houston Rockets lifer. When it comes to your job, Craig, what to you do you think is the most rewarding thing of what you do on a day-to-day basis with this team?
I will take a little step back. So when I was younger, so baseball was my sport. I stopped playing organized basketball my freshman year in high school. Baseball was my sport. And then ultimately when I realized that my future would not be in baseball either, after a couple of transfers, moving around a little bit in college to play, and also a initial desire also to get into medicine, whether either people medicine or veterinary medicine, I realized that calculus and advanced chemistry and stuff, I just was not going to handle too much more of that. I was like, well, I love sports. I love to talk. My freshman year when I played baseball, our games were on the radio. I thought it was pretty fascinating. So that's kind of ultimately how I got that little bit of an itch. And so to me, the most rewarding thing about what I do is that I still pinch myself. I wake up every day and realize that I can actually, and still am, doing this for a living. I think back at the last basketball games that I called when I was at Sam Houston State. I did the men's and women's games in their respective conference tournaments, and I honestly thought, I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to get an opportunity to do this again ever. And here I am almost 30 years later after that fact, and I'm still doing it, and I'm doing it in the capacity that I am, and I've had the chance to succeed multiple legends that were in the booth, both on the radio side with Gene Peterson and Jim Foley, and then Worrell on the TV side, and to continue to sort of handle and take that tradition forward, to grow up as a fan of the team and to continue to do this and represent the organization that I grew up rooting for. That to me, that's truly what's most rewarding. I've always considered this, and I tell people this all the time, consider this the next best thing to actually playing sports, playing professionally. And I get paid to watch and talk about basketball. And so all is good to me. Again, just the fact that I've been able to fulfill my professional dreams is something that I never take lightly. And I'm very, very grateful for every single day.
Well, getting paid to watch and talk about basketball, it might, take the cake for this next question, but I got to know, what is it about basketball that you love? Because everybody's answer is different. What is it about the game that you love?
I love the excitement and the athleticism of the players. I mean, the Rockets teams in the 1990s are the ones that really kind of got me hooked on this. But first of all, you never know what you're going to get every single night. And I think that's another sort of lure to working in sports, is that, yes, in some aspects just like there is with any job and profession, there are some redundancies, but I think there are a lot less with this, because every game, everything changes all the time. So it's never the same thing every single time out. But I just think the excitement, the fun, the feeling of the sport, the event of games, they feel big. They still feel big to me, as big now as they did 30 years ago. That's what makes me really excited about this. Obviously in my time with the Rockets, I went my first year doing radio full time in 2008 was the first time the Rockets had made it out of the first round in a dozen years. So that was pretty exciting. And we've had a lot of really good teams over the course of my full-time broadcasting time here. And so I'm very fortunate about that. And obviously now things are much different. The last 3 years, the Rockets have had the worst combined record in the league over the last 3 years. But to me, it's still exciting because it's about the process and the progress and the work that these young guys in, and hopefully seeing some of this stuff really start to come to fruition in the next couple of years. But it's just sort of the excitement about being around something that's an event, and so many people care so much about it. And it's really cool to kind of have play a small role in all of that. And I still get as excited before every single game, no matter whether it's preseason, regular season, or postseason, as I did when I first started. And so I love it.
It's definitely something that you can tell. You bring the passion, the enthusiasm, the energy, all of it to the broadcast, and we couldn't be more grateful for it, Craig. Coming up, we want to get into some of the expectations for this next season. What are the biggest storylines heading into this season for your Houston Rockets? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season's kicking off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long, because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every single time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every single victory along the way. That's right, every single victory. Right now, we can go take a look at some of these Super Bowl 58 outright betting favorites. The Kansas City Chiefs, the far away leading favorite at plus 600. Philadelphia Eagles at plus 800. Buffalo Bills at plus 900. And then rounding out the top five, you have the Bengals and the 49ers at plus 1,000 a piece. The Houston Texans way down there in the rear at plus 18,000 to win the Super Bowl. But hey, if the Texans win games during the regular season, you get those bonus bets that you can use on spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, our conversation with Craig Ackerman, one of the voices of your Houston Rockets. And Craig, I have to take this aside because I remember, I think the very first time I introduced you on this podcast, when I first took it over, I introduced you as the voice of the Houston Rockets, and you had to correct me. You were like, there are many voices of the Houston Rockets, Jackson. I am but one of them. And so now I have to always tiptoe around it to make sure that we honor the other voices of the team for sure. All right, Craig, so we're rolling into this next season. We're effectively what, the ownership, upper management, Rafael Stone, Tillman Fertitta have kind of dubbed phase 2 of the Rockets rebuild. What's the #1 story that you're most intrigued by heading into training camp and the start of a new season and a kind of a new era for this team?
Well, that's a good question, because I think there are a million storylines with this team that carry quite a bit of equal weight, especially in terms of ultimately how much better this team is going to be this year. Look, they're going to be better. There's no question about that. How much better, I think, is still anybody's guess. But I mean, I would say sort of 1A and 1B, and you could probably flip-flop them if you wanted to. First of all, I mean, you've got a new direction and new leadership with Ime Udoka and his staff. So I'm looking forward to what kind of an imprint that they can make on this team, and again, in particular, on the young players. And then again, as it's been, quite honestly, for the last couple of years, it's still pretty much primarily about the growth of now what has sort of become, I guess, a core 6 guys with the incoming draft class of Thompson and Whitmore added to Jabari and Tari and Sengun and Jalen Green, and frankly, probably a little, and to a lesser extent, Kevin Porter Jr. as well. But the veterans are going to help raise the floor of this team. The folks that they ended up signing in the offseason, Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks and Jeff Green and Jock and so forth. They're definitely going to raise the floor of this team. But ultimately, for this group to continue to improve and get over the hump and to potentially be in a position where they can A, contend for a play-in spot, B, get into the play-in, and then on down the line, contend for a playoff spot, get in and try to move up the standings in the West. Everything still hinges on the growth and development of these young players. But I think a lot of that will also sort of work hand in hand in conjunction with the new staff. So sort of 1A and 1B, and I think you can flip-flop both, but I think they're both equally as important.
I'm so curious to see how things change a little bit with Ime in charge. We know that he just brings a very distinct style. He's kind of this gritty, hard-nosed, a bit more kind of like that old school coach coming from the Popovich coaching tree as well. We know that there's ties that run deep between those two guys. So it's so curious to me to see which guys kind of, I guess, benefit the most from bringing in Ime. And I'm kind of torn on who benefits the most from Ime, because I feel like you could easily point to some of the guys that have a bit more of that proclivity for defense, the Jabaris and the Taris, guys who are really going to probably feel empowered on that side of the basketball. But then I also think that Jalen Green, maybe just because he's poised to take a massive year 3 leap anyways, I think he could easily be the guy that benefits the most from a new voice in that locker room.
I think you could say, again, I think that the case can be made, perhaps maybe Thompson and Whitmore aside a little bit, because they're rookies and there's going to be an adjustment period for them. But especially for guys like Jalen Green and Sengun, as you mentioned, are coming into their third years. This is a massive season for them, for them individually, personally, obviously, for their future career earnings opportunities moving forward as they become extension eligible and so on and so forth. But most importantly, it's the strides that they take this year, I think will really tell the sign on how much better and ultimately where this team will finish. But I think everybody can, all those young guys can benefit in some form or fashion. I think it's pretty obvious, even though Ime Udoka hasn't coached a single game yet, that there's kind of a new sheriff in town and there's a different sort of tone being set now, which I think will benefit everybody. And again, I'm just excited to see it all come together. I'm excited, I'm excited to see if certain guys do or don't fulfill whatever it is that they're being asked to do from the coaching staff, how that ultimately affects where and how much they played this season. I think there's just a million different storylines, and but I think everybody on the roster that's not a veteran that's been in this league before, and quite honestly, all players can benefit from quality coaching. But I think young players in particular, I'm going to be fascinated to see how this plays out with the new staff and how it impacts them and where they ultimately either take advantage of the situation or don't, because those are a lot of questions that still need to be answered with this team.
And when we're kind of sticking along with some of the storylines heading into this next season, obviously, how Ime and his staff come in and the expectations that they have and how they impact and elevate and bring up these other players, that's going to be kind of this big one. It's going to follow the entire season. I think another one that has been a recurring storyline for a while now is Kevin Porter Jr.'s role on this team, because for the better part of these last 2 seasons, he's been trying to learn and evolve and take on the duties of that point guard role. And it's very clear that that's not going to be the direction for this team moving forward, with bringing in Fred VanVleet and drafting Ime Thompson. KPJ is going back to his more natural position of playing on the wing, playing as a score first guy, and potentially coming off the bench this upcoming season as, a super sixth man for this Rockets team. I am so interested to see how that dynamic shift works for him, because towards the end of the point guard experiment with KPJ, the talent was so undeniable. You watch him play, he is such an insanely talented guy, but the fit never felt quite right, unfortunately. It felt like he was thinking too much at times about what he was doing on the court because he just wasn't in his natural position. And I really think he could be the sleeper candidate for the guy who benefits the most from this adjustment, from the roster changing so much, because he gets to go back to playing his natural position on the wing and just focused on scoring and being a secondary creator rather than having to set the table of the entire offense.
Yeah, well, yeah, look, the Rockets, when they originally acquired him, obviously they sent it. One of the reasons why they sent him down to the G League was for him to play point guard, to try to see if that was an area that he would be a fit in. Obviously, he that's, as you mentioned, was not his natural position. He is a really talented kid. There's no question about that. I know the organization still remains high on him, but yeah, that's another area that we'll see where he fits in, how he fits in. Will he or will he not ultimately accept and thrive in whatever role, because we still don't know whatever role he's going to be asked to do from this new coaching staff. But I certainly think the talent is there. Obviously he has some strengths, namely his ability to catch and shoot. So this would, in theory, put him in better positioning, right, to be more of a catch and shoot threat, which will play into more of his strengths there. So I'm excited about that. So yeah, I mean, we'll see how this ultimately plays out. But I think it's, they're going to give him a role, and ultimately it's up to him to take advantage of it. And if he does, then I think the team will be much better for it. If he doesn't, obviously, then, I think as you look at this roster, I don't think it's as much of an issue this season, and it's been in previous seasons, even though the Rockets didn't have a very good record. I know I've mentioned this quite a few times in various forums, but the Rockets in previous years have had a lot of guys who had strong cases for a variety of legitimate reasons why they deserved an opportunity to play. I think that some of that has been alleviated a little bit with this roster, because now you have some veterans that'll probably be on the back end of the rotation a little bit that might be a little bit better suited for those situations, especially with where they're currently at in their careers. But I think there's going to be, you never know what kind of injuries you're going to get. So it's good to have flexibility with guys like Kevin, who, if you need to, can give you some spot minutes still at the point guard, if that's what he's asked to do. But yeah, I think there's still going to be some guys ultimately, as they try to figure out this rotation, where some guys are going to get squeezed. But I think that's a good problem, because I think it's going to raise the level of competition in practice, not just in games, but in practice. And I think that's what this team really needs, to push these young guys to take the next step so they start winning more basketball games.
Coming up, which one of the Rockets' returning sophomores and junior classmen takes the biggest leap this next season, and what should be the expectations for Ime Thompson and Cam Whitmore during their rookie campaigns? We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets. Now, Craig, when we look at the members of the Rockets, kind of core 6, core 7, how you look at it, the guys who are returning this upcoming season, I want to focus in here momentarily on Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., and Tari Eason, these 4 names. Of those 4 guys, based on where they are each at right now, we've seen different highlight clips and pro runs and all the work that these guys are putting in the offseason. Alperen Sengun playing for the Turkish national team in some FIBA action. All 4 of these guys have been putting out an immense amount of work. We saw how dominant Jabari and Tari looked at Summer League. Where these guys are right now, who do you think takes the biggest leap of those 4 guys from where they are right now to where they'll be at the end of the season?
It's a tough question to say who's going to take the biggest leap. Ultimately, I think Jalen's got the highest ceiling of any of those guys. And so he probably has the quote unquote most room to take the biggest leap. But look, obviously with Sengun's play with his national team, and originally he wasn't going to commit and then did, and then to do what he did was pretty darn impressive. You mentioned then Tari and Jabari in the Summer League were just so dominant. I mean, the light just came after that first half of that first game for Jabari. He was just playing with just ridiculous amounts of confidence. And I think we saw his confidence grow at the end of last season as well. I think that's a really good sign. But what I would like to see all of them collectively take big leaps. I think it's more important at this point in year 3, as I kind of hinted at a little bit earlier with Sengun and Jalen Green, because it is their 3rd seasons. And then ultimately there are some decisions that have to be made surrounding their futures, not only here, but in the league as well, depending upon how things shake out. There always are exceptions to the rule, right? But typically guys are pretty much who they are after 3 years in the league. And so I think it's most important for Green and Sengun to take significant strides forward. But collectively as a group, and this may be just sort of me circling around your answer, because I'm not exactly sure how to answer it, other than I think for the good of the team, that entire group needs to take strides this year. There are all areas of their games that they have to get better at. Jalen Green has to become a better point of attack defender. He's got to become a more consistent and efficient shooter. Sengun's got to get better defensively, especially when it comes to pick and rolls. He's got to be able to step outside and at least make defenses honest with his ability to take and make threes. I love Tari Eason, but continue to be consistent, be a better finisher around the rim. Obviously, he was a ridiculous offensive rebounder last year.
Look, if you can get Tari shooting 50% at the rim, he becomes the best player in the NBA. Done.
So his finishing ability needs to get better. And then look, it was a mixed bag last year for Jabari. Struggled in the first half of the season, much like Jalen Green did his rookie season. Much better in the second half. But he has all the tools as well. And I loved the confidence that he played with in summer league. That really showed a lot, but his ability to take and make more threes, his ability to defend better as he continues to get a little older and more mature and his body gets stronger and so forth. So to me, I'm just looking for each of those guys to take steps forward. And if they all do collectively as a group, no matter how big or how small their steps forward are, if those four guys are significantly better in years 2 for Smith and Eason, in years 3 for Sengun and Green, this team will be so much better. As I mentioned, this team is going to be a lot better than they have been this season, but their ceiling will be so much better if all those guys show some significant improvement. So I think, again, as a group, we need to see all these guys get better.
I will gladly take seeing all four of those guys take steps forwards, because that means that we've got a very exciting, very talented team on our hands this upcoming season. You hinted at it there, right? The struggles for Jalen Green, his rookie year, Jabari Smith Jr., his rookie year. Things are quite different this time around for Ime Thompson and Cam Whitmore coming in. They don't have maybe the same, room for growth that Jalen and Jabari did during their rookie years. I know that you've mentioned this, and very clearly there's still going to be an emphasis placed on development and getting these young guys where they need to be. But there's also a bit of an emphasis being placed by Ime himself on the fact he's never missed the playoffs. He wants to continue to win games. The organization wants to get back to a place where they're playing meaningful basketball games once again. So how do you think the expectations will look or should look for Ime Thompson and Cam Whitmore in their rookie seasons? The fact that they're not just, going out there and being given 30 plus minutes a night to make all the mistakes in the world that they can make.
Well, let's start with Cam Whitmore. Obviously, he had a really good run too in the summer league. Very impressive. He's a young man who's coming in with a chip on his shoulder. I still can't believe the Rockets were able to get him at 20 when they were considering him obviously much higher in the lottery than that. So he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. He's super talented. He's the one guy, depending upon how things shake out, if everybody's healthy, I don't know as of right now. I think we'll probably have a little bit of a clearer idea as they start getting into training camp and they get everybody together. But as of right now, I think it's sort of unclear and to be determined how much of a role he's going to play at the NBA level this season. Now, what I'm hoping in his case is much like Tari Eason, right? Because we kind of thought quite a bit about that with Tari going into his rookie season. What I'm hoping is that Cam Whitmore is so impressive in practices and in training camp and in preseason that he forces his way into the NBA rotation.
Forces the hand of the coaching staff, carves out some minutes for himself.
Right. That's my hope that he impresses so much that he basically forces his way into the rotation. But I think as it sits right now, I don't think anybody knows exactly what his role is going to be when the season comes along. But I'm hoping. I think he's got all the tools. Terrific size. He's obviously so super young. But unlike Green and unlike Jabari, he already has an NBA body at 19, right? And so physically, I think he's a little bit ahead of the game than a lot of 19-year-olds. So I'm excited to watch him and see how that shakes out. And then Ime Thompson. Unfortunately, we only saw like 3/4 of one summer league game, but this dude is impressive. Just his calmness, his control, his vision. He's a really impressive person. It seems like his basketball IQ is just off the charts. Speaking of guys who already have an NBA body, he has it. He's huge, especially for a point guard. He's gigantic. He's an active defender. Obviously, he's another one of those athletic freaks. And we saw some of that in the summer league as well. I was very, I have been very, very impressed with him so far, despite only seeing him for 3/4 of one summer league game. Obviously, I think his role is going to be coming off the bench to back up Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green, who are going to be the starting guards. But I think if he continues to work, much like Jalen, we've heard from Jalen Green, and obviously he's been proven with Jalen, he's got a crazy high level work ethic. So that will help him out. But I think his ability to defend right away, his passing ability, and he's just so calm, well beyond his years. I think he's going to have a real solid rookie season. Again, maybe not quite the amount of playing time as these other guys have, because the team is just different at this stage of the game. But I'll admit, I didn't watch any OTE basketball. And so I really did not know a whole lot about him. I know a lot of people talked about the level of competition that was in that league. But he just has a certain togetherness about him that I think will lend itself to a very, very productive and long NBA career.
You keep coming back to that word. You used it a couple times: calm, the togetherness, the IQ. That was easily the thing that stood out the most watching him play. Now he comes in a little bit older as a rookie than what we were used to with Jalen and Jabari as well. But there's just something about his game that just, and it kind of seeps into the other players on the court. He's able to calm the troops down a little bit.
Seems like he's a sort of a natural born leader. Yeah.
Definitely. And you can't speed him up or slow. Like, he is going to play at his speed. And even though we only got to see it for about 3.5 quarters in summer league, I saw enough. And then unlike you, I did watch some OTE games. I was like, this guy has something special. And for Houston to be able to walk away with him and Cam Whitmore, I mean, talk about
terrific draft,
just crushing it in what is hopefully going to be the final draft with like a high lottery pick for many years to come. Just absolutely crushed it there on the way out of phase 1 of the rebuild. Now, Craig, before we wrap this thing up, I have a series of some over-under questions that I've been asking. Is it cool if I hit you with those?
Yeah, sure. Go right ahead.
Okay. So, very first one. And I was told by Jonathan Fagan that I did a good job on these. So he hyped me up quite a bit. He said I made them difficult.
That's high praise there, because because if it wasn't, he would tell you.
He absolutely would. I know that. We both know that for a fact. All right. So first one. Jalen Green, over or under 24.5 points per game?
So he was at what? So 22 last year, right?
22.
I don't have the. He was at 22 last year. I'm gonna say he's going to be around. So I'll take the under there. He'll be around what he was last year, but I think his efficiency will be better, and so then I think ultimately that number will be more impactful, because look, Fred VanVleet's going to take significant command of this offense, as he frankly should. And again, there are a lot of guys on this team that could put the ball in the hole. So I think I think the number of shots he probably gets comes down per game. I think his efficiency raises, and ultimately what was a very encouraging sign for him, especially in the second half of last year, was his ability to really start drawing a lot of fouls and get to the free throw line. And so I think his number is probably going to be right around where it was last year, but I think his efficiency will be up. And because of that, I think that number will be more impactful.
Better efficiency would do wonders for Jalen, even if he stayed around the same or even took a dip as far as the raw PPG.
For sure.
But if the efficiency goes up, then that's better. I might adjust that question in later episodes of this running media series, and I might switch it to efficiency just for you and Jonathan, because you both commented on the efficiency element for Jalen. Next guy on our list, though, Alperen Sengun, over under 4.5 assists per game.
Boy, again, I don't have that number in front of here.
You're good.
Let me look it up real quick. What was he at last year?
I want to say it was just under 4, if I'm not
He was
mistaken.
just under 4. All right, I'm going over on that.
Ooh.
I think he ultimately will be used a little bit differently this season than we've seen in the past. Obviously, he is an elite passer, I think ultimately the bulk, one would assume, right, the bulk of the Rockets' offense is going to run through either Fred and or Sengun. And then Fred's ability to play off the ball too, I think is something that will be beneficial to Sengun. So I'm gonna say over. I think pretty easily for Sengun in the assist column this year.
I love that. That was a confident over. And Fred's ability to play off the ball, right, not only benefits Sengun, it also will more than likely benefit Ime Thompson as well for him.
Yeah, because now you can mix and match. Mm-hmm. You can mix and match all those guys in the backcourt against different teams, different lineup combination, and so forth. And so, yeah, I mean, the luxury with Sengun on the floor with the ball in his hands is he typically tends to make the right reads when it comes to his passing. And so I think everybody ultimately will benefit from that.
All right. Third guy on our list, third out of 4, Jabari Smith Jr., over or under 37.5 from 3. He shot just under 31% this last year.
Yeah. That's a pretty significant leap, although based on his couple games in summer league, he's going to shoot 45 from 3. I'll say
it's tough because you're looking at, you go back, you're like, he shot well in college, but then he struggled last year, but then he looked lights out in the summer league. What are we doing?
You know what? I'll go league average is right around 36%. I think he'll, so I'll probably take the under a little bit there. But I think he'll improve to league average 36-ish, which is obviously a little bit under the 37.5. But I think if he makes that jump, a 5 percentage point leap in terms of his 3-point shooting from his rookie season to his sophomore season, I think anybody and everybody would take that.
Okay. All right. And that's still a great spot to be in, right? Like that's not a bad number whatsoever. I maybe the 37.5 was a little aggressive.
We'll have to see how many shots he gets with this
for
team.
Sure.
Because obviously so much of what goes into shooting is rhythm. And if your shot opportunities are inconsistent, it's tough for shooters, even really good ones, as Jabari has proven over the course of his basketball playing career. It can be tough. So I think that will play a little bit of a role in it, but I think he will be much, much better than he was as a rookie. But I'll go the under there a little bit, because I think 7% leap from one year to the next might be a tad bit too much to put on his shoulders.
Okay. All right. And last one that we've got here for you, Ime Thompson, 18.5 minutes per game, over or under? It's worth noting, Tari played 21.5 minutes per game.
Yeah, I think he's going to be over. I think he's going to be over that total. I guess if you had Van Fleet around 30, right, and Jalen Green's probably going to play more minutes than anybody, but with this roster, and again, it's a pretty deep roster of guys who have cases that they can make that you should be playing. If Jalen Green's, at 32 or 34, what have you, I think there's an opportunity. I mean, if Fred's around 30 minutes a game, I think that there's a chance, again, with some of those combinations, as we mentioned, with Fred and Jalen starting together, and then you could ultimately play KPJ at the 3 at some if you had to and wanted to. You could slide Fred to the 2, play Ime Thompson at the 1. I'll take the over on the 18.5. I mean, he was selected 4th overall, so he's not going to play 30 minutes a game, but I think he's going to reach that over on the 18.5.
Yeah, probably not quite starters level minutes, but a solid 20-ish a night seems like the right spot probably for Ime Thompson for his rookie year, given all the other things that we've discussed about this team and all the things that are they're hoping to achieve this upcoming season. Craig, it has been absolutely fantastic having you on the program. Any parting words that you want to have for our audience, for our listeners?
Well, I'm glad the schedule came out. I understand why the NBA takes so long to put it out, but it's a little agonizing as you try to figure out what you want to do, where you're going to be for 6 months out of your life. But I'm glad the schedule is out. Again, I'm really, really, really excited about this team. I think part of this process, if you will, even though that's been kind of used a lot over the last 3 years, has been, being excited about the growth and the movement forward. I do think this team is going to be significantly better this season than we've seen in the last 3 years. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think the veterans that were added to this group, they're going to raise the floor. I think competition and practice is going to be better than it's been the last 3 years. I think they're ultimately going to be playing more meaningful games. Now, whether or not they win a sizable chunk of these meaningful games, or at least the amount that they win is still to be determined. But I think they're going to be playing in a heck of a lot more meaningful games, which is super important to the growth of these young guys. I'm excited again, as I mentioned. I'm excited to see how the veterans can affect the young guys, the coaching staff can affect the young guys, and then ultimately these guys, especially for Sengun and Green coming into year 3, and how important of a season it is for both of those guys, how much better they are this year. But yeah, I think it's going to be fun. I'm always ready to go. As I mentioned earlier, too, I wish the season was starting tomorrow, but 6 more weeks, and we'll start to get some answers to some of these questions, and we'll be back on TV, and the team will be playing again, and I'll be back in my happy place.
Rockets basketball is almost back. Craig, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for stopping by the program, man.
Oh, I know, by the way, thank you, and it'll be a lot less hot in October than it is now. Bam. Looking forward to that. All right. Thanks, Jackson. I appreciate it as always.
Thanks, Craig. That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets on YouTube. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know in the YouTube comments who else you would like to hear from on our Rockets media series here. Coming up, we should have Vanessa Richardson and Ryan Hollins back on the show shortly. Let us know in the comments who else you want to hear from. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.